lot has been happening right before the new CBA is supposed to kick in on July 1st. And guys, we know that you guys are fanatics just like us. You guys are probably looking at a lot of these trades and thinking, what is going on?
Absolutely.
For Jordan Poole, Bradley Beal not getting a first round draft pick, John Collins for virtually nothing to Utah, and then the out of left field trade for Porzingis. There's been movement all over the NBA.
And if you're not living under a rock, you've probably heard of something called the CBA, or the collective bargaining agreement. And to be honest with you, Doc, it is ginormous. It has a lot of content, and I, for a fact, know that it's something like 500 pages of documents just laid out, and a ton of different rules and things that are going to be implemented in the upcoming season and so forth and subsequently. And I think a lot of people are a little confused about it, and I myself still need to learn a few things, brush up a little bit, because there's a lot of content. And I think there's something that you've compiled that's really sweet, and we're going to try and take a look at it, try and make a simplified version for everybody, and I'm excited to take a look.
Oh yeah, I am too. I'm excited to give an explanation as well, because you're right. The new CBA, which stretches all the way to 2030, is over a 500-page document. So there's a lot to sort through there. So we wanted to make sure that our listeners could kind of look at the bare minimum of how it affects their teams moving forward, and what are some of the changes that are relevant to us as fans. So let's look at this, guys. Here's our little slideshow. All right, so the things we want to discuss are going to be the length of how long the CBA is going to be, different tax aprons that appear. We have changes to contract extensions, cap smoothing. There's even changes to how awards are voted for, okay? Okay, so the length is going to be from the start of July 1st, 2023, and it's going to run all the way to the 29-30 season. So it's gonna take us through the rest of this decade. So right now, for next year, the salary cap is projected at $134 million. The tax level, so really that what we're used to as fans, that kind of like max level you're allowed to spend before you have to start paying a luxury tax. You guys have probably heard of it as the luxury tax apron. That's going to be $165. It originally was less, but a new TV deal came out, so it's put that up just by about $3 million. But the real changes come from the second apron, when you essentially get hard capped as a team, and so that is $17.5 million over the luxury tax level. Okay, and these new restrictions are not going to start till the 24-25 season. So really, the NBA is giving an amnesty period for teams over that apron to essentially start to reformat their roster, because honestly, if you are over the second apron, it is virtually impossible to construct a championship roster the way you could in the past. So these are just some examples of the teams that really could benefit from trying to move off. As you can see, the Clippers, Golden State Warriors, the Phoenix Suns are now dangerously close, especially with the Bradley Beal trade. Here are the restrictions when you go over that second apron. Okay, you can no longer use the mid-level or the biannual. What that means is no Danilo Gallinari, or, if you're the Celtics, Dante DiVincenzo to the Warriors, no Joe Ingles to the Bucks, so on and so forth, right? You can no longer use mid-level exceptions too. You can't buy guys out. You can't trade first-round draft picks over the course of the next greater than 7 years, and you can no longer take more salary back. That means if those rules were implemented now, the KD trade, the Kyrie trade, those trades are not happening. Okay, contract extensions too. This is important because veterans are now allowed to take 140% added on to their contract extension, where before it was only 120. So this affects guys like Jaylen Brown, Domantas Sabonis, DeJounte Murray. Honestly, it affects Lauri Markkanen in kind of a negative way because he has really outplayed his contract, but we can talk about that later. Okay, cap smoothing. Everyone remembers in 2016 when we had the most insane, notorious cap spike that ever occurred. It allowed Golden State to sign KD and create a dynasty. That no longer can happen. It's going to raise 10% annually. That's it. So no more massive spikes from TV deals. Award voting. All right. So if you, and like this is a very interesting point to look at, because when you look at Ja Morant, he got suspended for 25 games, right? That means that under the new CBA, he is ineligible for MVP and all NBA teams. So that is a massive hit to his wallet. A lot of people looked at that and said, I don't know if 25 games is enough, but in reality, when you look at how the new CBA is set up, he's completely disqualified from awards that would get him a bigger contract. That's painful if you look at not just what's happening now, but the bigger picture for Ja Morant. So yeah, that's kind of the new CBA crash course. JD, you got any questions?
I mean, I think it's a lot to take in. It seems like a lot of these top teams who have huge markets might be impacted very severely. I'm thinking a little bit about the Clippers with Kawhi Leonard, with Paul George.
Mm-hmm.
I think those two, they are going to be eligible for some max extensions in a little bit. I think that they're going to have maybe some issues now. I mean, we've seen things like you were mentioning earlier, Beal just getting pawned off for very little, just for salary dump. We're seeing Collins now most recently. What we're going to get into in a little bit is that, Collins was a great player and had a lot to, show forth, but they just had to dump off the salary so they could maybe not yield to that second apron. So I think it has a huge implication for a lot of teams. Are there any teams in particular that, kind of you see might move off of some people or anything like that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I was listening to the Lowe post because I thoroughly enjoy Zach Lowe. I think he's a great TV personality who's very analytical and very objective or subjective. He reported that the front office of the Clippers is now coming to the table in a very non-traditional way when you handle your superstars. Normally, when you're someone of Paul George or Kawhi Leonard's caliber, I would throw Damian Lillard in there, James Harden, these guys who really have built up their pedigree throughout the league. There's normally no negotiating. They walk in, they sign the max for the max, and then they kind of leave. What I heard via Zach Lowe is that this is not going to be the case with the Clippers. The Clippers are looking at more of like a 3+1 kind of situation versus 5 max deals with like non-guarantees attached to them. And that makes a lot of sense, honestly. Kawhi hasn't been playing. PG-13 hasn't been playing. And there you have to accept the realism that you're not as effective as you used to be. I think what I'm really surprised at is the Suns just, for lack of a better term, just not giving a shit whatsoever and just barreling towards the second apron anyways. I think that's very shocking. I mean, with all they have Ayton, they have Beal, Durant, and Booker. That's $165 million wrapped up in salary. You already hit the luxury tax at that point with 4 players. So I don't know how they're going to figure out that. I'm actually very interested to see how they fill out the rest of their roster. I would not be surprised if they were just offering a paradise to veterans trying to ring chase, because that's what they're trying to do too. But outside of that, we saw Golden State. I mean, they dumped Jordan Poole.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's happening all over. I'm not going to be surprised if it continues to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I have my eye on Karl Anthony Towns of the Minnesota Timberwolves. They just signed Naz Reid to, what was it, $42 million 3-year contract? Is that
I believe so, yeah. He
deserves it. He's a great player. I was mentioning a little bit about him in a previous podcast that he's a sleeper, really good guy for a lot of teams. He plays a little bit of the center, a little bit of the power forward. But I'm just seeing that, they're paying a lot of these guys. They're starting to become really expensive, especially with Gobert. I think Minnesota, they need to start making moves, and I'm starting to be afraid that Minnesota might have some issues down the line with the CBA rules. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. I think that if they knew that this kind of CBA was going to be laid down, I don't think they ever would have made the Gobert trade. There's no way. You can't just buy championships anymore. And I think that was, I don't know, I'm speculating, but that seemed like what that move kind of was just trying to buy a championship. What I would do theoretically is I would start tearing this thing down to the studs. But I would keep Anthony Edwards and Rudy Gobert, because you're going to have to give assets to get off that contract. And I think Anthony and Rudy could build something. I like having Naz Reid too, because he is the perfect backup center, backup four. He's really versatile too. I love that. But with everyone else, I mean, you might have to shop Cat to see what he's worth.
Yeah, I mean, we have seen some trade rumors go around a little bit that he might be moving somewhere. We talked a little bit on the pod as well that, a potential place that he could land is Portland. If maybe the Trailblazers are willing to trade some of their young talent. I'm starting to believe that they won't do that. But you never know, there's been crazier things that happen. We're seeing guys essentially get pawned off for pennies. Although I don't think that would necessarily happen with Cat. I think Cat is just too big of a talent. But I could also see, in a sense, it's a bit of a salary dump. Like you look at Bradley Beal, for instance. I could have never have imagined that you would get hardly anything out of that trade aside from, pawning off your salary to the Phoenix Suns.
I think that the Wizards did really well for what they had. I think getting the 6 first rounders and I think the 1 pick swap, that was the most they could have gotten from a team that wanted Bradley Beal. And then getting Chris Paul back and being able to flip him to the Warriors for a first round, a second round, and Jordan Poole. I really liked that, even though they let Kristaps Porzingis go for Tyus Jones, which is still insane to me. I mean, I think they deserve a C+, B-. Like, I don't even know how you would get off some of these contracts. Maybe a C+. I like having Jordan.
Thank you for watching another episode of the Full Court Press NBA podcast. For the full podcast, click the link